If you've been creating comics for a while, you've probably already experienced burnout. And you've probably found that it's really hard to get back into the habit of creating comics. And it's likely that you think that burnout is the cause for that. But it's not. It's caused by the fact that you rested for too long. So in this video, I'm going to show you what to do in the first 24 hours after you've burnt out and give you a roadmap to getting back to working on your comic without immediately going back into burnout. And I have a free download in the description of this video, which you can use to check whether you're burnt out or not and what to do next. So, is rest good or bad? Well, the thing with rest is that the dose makes the poison. It's kind of like chocolate. It's great in small quantities, but if you eat too much of it, you will die, which isn't ideal for a creative pursuit. That means we need to manage how much rest we take and be disciplined with it. If you take a couple of weeks away from your comic, then that might seem like a really good idea. But one of the things that most people don't talk about when it comes to rest is what you're trading. When you rest, you're trading recovery for momentum. And this is one of the main reasons why most people don't like the idea of intentionally stopping making their comic. You may feel well rested and mentally recover, but you're also trading off all that momentum that you are building up. Let's take your friend of mine, Sisyphus, as an example. Now, he wasn't a comic creator from what I can tell, but he knows a thing or two about momentum. For those who don't know him or his story, because he was a little prick, the gods made him push a boulder up a hill every day only for it to roll back down to the bottom. Resting is essentially you letting go of your own boulder, allowing it to roll back down to the bottom. And pushing a boulder up a hill from the very bottom is a lot of hard work. So it's no wonder that we'd find ways to try and avoid that by just not resting at all. But if you force yourself to keep pushing that boulder up the hill, even if you're almost near the top, without any rest and having zero energy, then you're just going to stand still. You'll be stuck on a hill with a boulder that won't move up. So you have to let the boulder go and rest. But the reason why that if you rest for too long, it's harder to push the boulder up is because in that time of you resting, your brain creates a narrative that makes things just more difficult. The creativity and the momentum that you had before is being replaced by self-doubt because your brain is trying to protect you from feeling burnt out again. So it tells you that you should rest for even longer, or maybe you shouldn't start up till next week because you won't be where you were before you rested anyway. These are all totally normal feelings to feel, and I think the main reason we feel this way is because we're imagining ourselves going right back to where we were before we rested. And this is the complete wrong approach. If you're flying beforehand, working on your comic every single day, producing page after page, you're not immediately going to go back to that level of productivity. It's not realistic or reasonable to expect that from yourself, but that's just how most people think. But we can't just do nothing, and so this is my strategy for starting your boulder pushing momentum the easy way. Now, I've given the concept of rest a hard time in this video, but it's important that you understand that letting go of the boulder and resting is the best thing that you can do when you're burnt out. Not only is it the best thing for you, it's the best thing for your comic. So just let it go and rest. Do whatever you find relaxing that isn't necessarily creative work so that you can recharge your batteries. Now, there isn't a magic number to how long you should be doing this for, but I'd recommend resting for 24 hours before going back to your comic. Now, that might feel like a really short period of time, but we're going to make coming back to our comic extremely easy, so you shouldn't need much longer than this. So, after your 24 hours is up, you need to work on your comic. But you should only work on your comic for 10 minutes at a time, even if you feel like you're full of energy. This is where the discipline comes in. And the reason why we're limiting ourselves so much is because we're going to treat this like creative physiotherapy. We're not going to rush back and try and lift the heaviest weight immediately because we need to warm up first. That's what this 10-minute system does. It promotes action because you're working on your comic, which is good, but it avoids you feeling so overwhelmed so quickly and pulling a creative muscle. And it definitely requires discipline to do this, just not toxic levels of discipline, which a lot of the advice seems to lean towards. You need to push through the pain. Yeah, okay, well you need to fuck off. Sorry, I fundamentally dislike the attitude of no pain, no gain when it comes to creative pursuits. And it's probably because I used to be that way myself. Even after resting, I jumped straight back in and try and match the output that I was doing before I burnt out and required the rest in the first place. It wasn't until I started doing videos like this and talking to comic creators one-to-one that I realized how much damage that attitude actually does. True discipline is trusting that taking a break and slowing down your momentum is the best thing that you can do for your comic. True discipline is taking small amounts of action and intentionally limiting yourself rather than rushing straight back. Trying to push through burnout without resting or trying to lift the heavy weight immediately after isn't discipline, it's self-sabotage. Imagine that your friend broke both their legs and they said to you that they're going to run a marathon because they're disciplined. You'd be like, bruh, sit down. The same is true for burnout. I know that 10 minutes doesn't sound like a lot, and you're right, it isn't. But also that's kind of the point. If you spend 10 minutes on your comic for the first couple of days after resting, then you're pushing that boulder back up in small increments. And that makes it easier to turn those 10 minutes into 30 minutes or an hour or more if you want or are able to, rather than going straight in at 3 hours. But I have deadlines, I hear you say, and I get it. Yes, deadlines are real. It's also true that you'll have moments where you do have to work a lot harder than normal and you have to push the limits of your energy and creativity. But if you're more organized and take breaks strategically throughout the entire process of creating your comic, then these burnout recoveries won't negatively impact your deadlines. If anything, they'll help you create your work to a better standard and on time, if not early. Now, before I tell you what the best way to stop burnout from happening in the first place is, I want to take 30 seconds to talk about my Patreon. It's the best way to support the channel, and if you want to follow along with me while I create my comic, I post detailed updates every month showing what's working and what isn't. And if you want additional help with your comic, I have all my guides, workshop replays, and the light version of my comic finisher kit available to patrons. Plus you'll get access to exclusive Discord channels as well. I'd love it if you could give it a look at patreon.com/BrinkleyComics. Now, let's stop burnout. So everything I've talked about up till this point is what you do when you're already feeling burnt out. But the ultimate prevention of creative burnout is, well, prevention. So this is how you can lessen the chances of you burning out in the future. One of the things that we're all collectively really bad at understanding is when we should stop working on our stuff. I used to be really bad at this. If I had like 4 or 5 hours available in the day, then I would squeeze every single second out of that time to work on my comic. Because the more time you spend on a comic, the faster that comic gets finished, right? Well, no, actually. Especially if you care about the quality of your work. Instead of thinking that you need to squeeze out every single second that you have available, I want you to start tracking what your limitations for creative work are. Now, I want you to really think about this because, like I said, we're bad at judging this sort of thing. And here's the question that you need to answer. How long can you produce your very best work without taking a significant break of a few hours? For me, I'd say my absolute limit is probably about 3 hours. When I'm in full creative flow, 3 hours just melts away like butter. But any more than that and my eyes start to glaze over. I lose focus and my quality noticeably dips. So give your best estimate for what your limit is and then take it back a little bit. So for me, I stated it's 3 hours, so I ensure that the majority of my comic sessions are about 2.5 hours each. This does 2 things. First, it means that I can maintain my momentum with focused comic sessions that are consistent, which helps with habit forming. And second, it means I'm not running my batteries down every single night. That's why it's really important to figure out where your creative limit is and then go slightly below that, which is another key when it comes to rest. Do not wait until your batteries are almost empty before you rest. If you're exhausted and you can barely string a sentence together, then you've waited too long. So respect your mind and body and take rests slightly earlier than you normally would. A lot of this comes down to trusting the process and trusting yourself as a creative. Trust that giving yourself more shorter breaks and not burning the candle at both ends will mean that you can create for longer. It means that you won't feel that inconsistent motivation that plagues so many of us. And it means that you're less likely to become frustrated and fatigued by your comic. Even when you're at the beginning of your comic, when it's the most exciting and your motivation is at its fullest, you should still do this because it's a great habit to get into. So let's bring it back to rest because that's the key for all of this. When you're burnt out, which you can check for yourself with the link in the description, use rest to recharge for the first 24 hours, but don't overdo it because otherwise it'll be harder to come back to your comic. Trading momentum for rest is always worth it. Use the 10-minute rule and check your expectations when you start back up. And set limits for your creativity so that you don't end up burnt out again. And trust your process that if you take care of yourself consistently, then you will create your best work consistently. And if you want to know exactly how to make the best comic you've ever made, then watch this video next where I'll show you the technique that I used to turn a comic that just wasn't working into one of my very best.